Bly Manor, I've got some notes. So I'm by no means a vlogger in any respect. I do shit posts that only I find funny, and I do them just for myself. I've lost my entire workday today. It has been like eviscerated by thinking about Bly Manor, which I finished yesterday. At this point, dude that has too many opinions on media on the internet is like an insult, which it should be. But as someone who sort of writes about media for a living, I needed to get this out of my mind so I could focus on other things. So let's talk about the theming of Bly House, or the lack of theming of Bly House, and what I would do to make it different, so that it doesn't haunt me anymore. So obviously this is going to be spoilers for Bly Manor. It's going to be spoilers for Hill House. I might mention random other movies tangentially, but nothing too significant. So to start off with, I liked Bly Manor, but the more and more I think about it, the less and less I like it. And that bar of liking it initially, it wasn't even like a rapturous, super excited. Like it was a I'm enjoying this. I'm having a good time with some of this material. So the kind of fall from grace has been particularly disappointing to me as someone who is just like absolutely in love with Hill House. I love horror, but I don't watch a lot of it because I'm a coward. So finding a series or a horror movie that is both, striking a nerve of something that is, tremendously scary, but also seems to have something really meaningful to say is like the perfect combination to me. This is part of the reason why I get really connected with American Horror Story Murder House, because at its core, it's a family drama disguised as a ghost story. It uses the genre of the ghost story to tell a very character-specific story. And that's what ultimately draws me to stories is no matter the genre, no matter if it's a superhero movie or if it's a sci-fi movie, what is really capturing me is what is the human emotion that's there? What are you trying to say? So part of what really works for Hill House for me that's not present in Bly Manor is this sort of central theme and the way that all of the character arcs fit into that sort of central theme. Now, I know lots of people have issues with Hill House, and they're valid. I know a lot of people have issues with the ending. It doesn't really bother me that much the way that it ended up kind of peachy keen, but grain of salt, I'm one of the 3 people in the world that did not mind the lost ending, because I am so much more invested in character arcs and character emotion over sort of solving mysteries. But in general, I think as long as the character arcs are satisfying and make sense, I don't care if the logic isn't 100% there. So what I really liked about Hill House was the way that the character arcs wrapped into this theme. So by the end of episode 1, we already know in Hill House, this is a family drama, and this is about familial trauma. How do different members of the family grapple with the loss of their mother? So there's sort of an external haunting, the obvious haunting of the actual literal ghosts. But then there's also the ways that each character is symbolically haunted in different ways. So we have the father who's kind of checked out, who's not really engaged in this conversation. We have Stephen, who is literally re-narrativizing his own experiences, re-narrativizing his own trauma and repackaging it to sell to other people. Shirley is literally painting over the dead. It's not always extremely subtle, but I feel like it still works. She's painting corpses. She's putting makeup on the dead to make them look presentable again. And she's building perfect model houses, again, sort of creating this fictional perfection to cover what is actually there, to cover that actual trauma. Theo is afraid to connect with other people. She has a literal physical barrier that she has to keep between herself and other people. Luke is embroiled with drug addiction. Nell succumbs to depression, anxiety, potentially suicidal ideation, if you sort of interpret it that way. So in each of the characters, they're all being haunted, but they're being haunted in specific ways that reflect and are symbolic of ways that people actually deal with trauma. So at the heart of this ghost story is ultimately a very strong, tight thesis statement that when we're learning about each of these characters, it's not just that we care about them as individual characters. We do, obviously, but we're also sort of adding on brick by brick to this larger argument that the series is making about familial trauma. Bly Manor doesn't have that kind of tight theming. I think by the time that I was in episode 3 or 4, I remember telling a friend of mine, I don't know what this story is about. If this story ends right now, I would say it's maybe about guilt. Maybe it's about grappling with guilt. But I don't have a solid idea of how do all of these character arcs fit together. What is really connecting all of these threads thematically, not like plot wise, but thematically? Why do we care about these characters in relationship to one another? Okay, so basically what I'm going to do here is identify some of the thematic issues that I saw with Bly Manor. What are some of the mechanical, filmmaking things that I took issue with? And then I'm going to give sort of like a breakdown, an episode by episode breakdown of how I wish the events had unfolded to sort of weave these character arcs into a coherent theme. Basically, this is unsolicited adult fan fiction. I am Kirkland brand cheap Jenny Nicholson that no one actually wants to listen to. But this is what we're gonna do. So I know it's an adaptation, and this is to some extent going to limit what you can do. I have not read Turn of the Screw. I'm not sort of invested in adaptations always being wholly accurate to the source material. I think you can kind of take bits of it and then sort of explore the new medium. So I'm not really going to be focused too much on which parts are or are not accurate. I know that a lot of Turn of the Screw is the ambiguity of whether the ghosts exist, and the show kind of throws it out the window. But let's just go with that. Let's take this as its own product. The central mechanical issue I saw with Bly Manor is that it's constantly telling us things and not showing them to us. So what I mean by this is instead of showing us scenes where characters make decisions and we learn about them through their actions, we're just kind of told exactly what's happening and exactly how each character feels. So the narration is a big one here. This is my own old man yells at cloud pet peeve, and I know that not everyone feels this way, and that's fine. But I don't like narration 80% of the time. I don't like narration in media because I feel like it too often just tells us exactly what's happening. There's a scene near the end of Bly Manor where Danny is in bed with Jamie, and the narrator, who we later find confirmed to be Jamie, says that the au pair slept next to the gardener, and for the first time she slept really well. There's absolutely no reason we need this narration. It doesn't tell us anything that we don't already know. We can get 100% of that information solely through the acting itself, solely through watching how Danny reacts, what Danny's facial expressions are, what our body language is to being in bed with a woman, presumably for the first time. That we get all that information through the subtlety of the acting and the framing, and we don't need a Desperate Housewives style narration of, and then Danny felt happy because she was with someone that she cared about. We got it. You don't have to tell us. Another area that this pops up that I think other people have also identified is the monologues. There's a lot of monologues, and monologues are great. I was a theater nerd. I love a good monologue. They're all really well written in Bly Manor. The problem is they're not smoothly integrated into the script. They just kind of come out of nowhere. So the first one that really kind of stood out to me is Hannah's monologue about glue traps, which again is a wonderfully written monologue. It seems like straight out of what you would perform in a drama class. The metaphor is there. It all makes sense. The issue that I have with it is it comes out of nowhere. So we see Rebecca leaving with Peter, and Owen turns around and looks at Hannah, and without skipping a beat, Hannah starts talking about glue traps. And this leads into this sort of larger monologue about how, the glue traps, Rebecca's being stuck, and Peter keeping her there is in some way violent, and there's some sort of allusion to it also being part of the house. So again, this is great, but there's no lead up to it whatsoever. It just kind of pops out of nowhere, and it makes Hannah seem strange for suddenly just going off on a tangent about glue traps. The other monologue, and I think the worst one, is Jamie's monologue about her past and tying it with Moonflowers. Again, this is really well written. There's a lot of great literary writing here. A lot of really wonderful metaphor, a lot of really wonderful wordplay with coal, with plants. It feels really good. It comes out of absolutely nowhere, and it goes on for way too long. So again, it feels weird that you're going on a maybe sort of romantic date with someone, and then they just tell you point blank, "This is my entire life story." It doesn't work, in my opinion. I want to be shown this information slowly. I don't want to be told it in a large chunk of writing. But I think the worst case of this overall is the alter ego, is Henry's alter ego, Henry Winthrop, I think. That character would be so much more threatening if the alter ego were just menacingly in the background in all of those scenes with Henry. The fact that he talks takes so much tension out of the scenes that he's in, because A, we know that he's not a threat at all, and B, it really starts towing the line of being kind of comedic. Instead of Henry talking to an evil version of himself, which is kind of already hokey, and being like, oh, I want to call her, I don't want to call her. And instead of having the alter ego literally stand there and say, don't you wish that Flora would pick up the phone, but you're so sad and she's never going to pick up the phone, and don't you feel so guilty? Instead of having that, just have Henry look at the phone. Have Henry look at the phone, have him look guilty, have him reach for it, put his hand back a little bit, he's not sure if he should do it, and have the alter ego standing behind him or standing in his proximity looking menacingly. I don't even mind the scenes where he is like sharing alcohol with the alter ego. I think that's kind of an interesting dynamic that's there. It's just as soon as he talks and as soon as it's made explicit that he is sort of a figment of his imagination, we lose all stakes, we lose all tension. And this is true also when Henry's brother explicitly calls him out and says, you have to live with a version of yourself, and I feel bad for you because I bet that version of yourself is a demon, a smiling evil demon, and you have to live with him. It's like, we got it. We got the metaphor. It's not that subtle. He looks exactly like him. He is a mirror reflection. We got it. We don't have to explain it. Another quick nitpicky thing, and this is totally just me being a pedant, there's a lot of like cinematography and script writing that feels like it's someone was really proud of how clever that shot was, or someone was really proud of how clever that line was, and then no one told them, you need to kill your babies. You need to cut out the stuff that you think is super clever. It's really not that good, and it's detracting your energy from other parts of this that are going to work. So we see a lot of match shots where we're taking a shot of Rebecca and then we're juxtaposing it with a shot of Danny. This is good because Danny and Rebecca are in a similar position. They're, the same job, but in different time periods. So there is sort of a relationship there. But we also see shots where they're matching shots of Danny with Rebecca with Flora. Flora has no thematic relationship to Danny and Rebecca. They're not equals. They're not parallels to each other. They're not character foils. They're all just sleeping. So when you have this kind of like slick cut between these two different characters, but you don't have a meaning behind it, then it really loses a lot. Thematically, part of the issue is that none of the characters are actually connected to the sort of central haunting of Bly Manor. So if we think of Hill House, for instance, like I mentioned before, each of the hauntings are connected to the central haunting. Now, in Hill House 2, the external haunting has nothing to do with the characters, but the actual haunting that we're following is not really the house, it's the haunting of the mother. It's what happened to the mother, where did she go? So that's actually the haunting that we're looking at, and that's the haunting that sticks with all the characters, and that's relevant to all the characters. That makes the story specific. We're not looking at a story about just a random family that just happens to be in a place that's haunted. We're looking at a specific story of people that are haunted in really, really unique personal ways. So again, Murder House from American Horror Story does this too. The explicit haunting, the actual ghosts aren't related to the Harmon family, but the ones that appear, the ones that the writers decided to write, the ones that they decided to make important ghosts within the story, many of them are connected explicitly with sex and sexuality. It's the Rubber Man, it's Moira, and that all ties into the central family dynamic of Ben's infidelity, of their failing marriage, and how it's impacting their child. So this sort of haunting, in order to be effective, really needs to be personal in some way. The external haunting doesn't need to be, but you have to make it personal in some way, or else you kind of lose all stakes. Because it's so impersonal, by the time we get to the sort of climax with the Lady of the Lake, none of the characters know her. And it's even explicitly said in the narration that when Danny manages to get rid of the Lady of the Lake, to resolve this sort of conflict, to get her off of the grounds, she does not know the meaning of the phrase that she says. She does not know the meaning of it's me, it's you, it's us. That has absolutely no meaning to her. She heard that phrase 20 minutes ago. She thinks it's significant in some way, and she just tries it. And this is explicitly text. This isn't just like me pulling stuff out of thin air. It's explicitly stated in the narration that she does not know what this means, but she thinks it might work, and she tries it and it works. This kind of shows how impersonal the haunting is. Literally, episode 8 is an info dump of the backstory of Lady of the Lake, which is itself its own kind of problem, because if they're turning faceless because they're forgetting and they're losing their sort of memory and they're losing their humanity, why do we have a detailed backstory of her? We don't really need this. But the other reason that we don't really need this is the characters literally don't know this. It is completely irrelevant to all of the characters. All they know about her is that she exists, that she lives in the lake, that she is scary, and that they call her the Lady of the Lake. They don't know the names. They don't know the name Viola. They don't know the name Perdita. None of it makes any sense to any of these characters. So they're literally just in the same space of a ghost that has nothing to do with them, and they get rid of her by saying something that they heard 20 minutes ago that also has nothing to do with them. So the fact that it's not personal, it really puts a hamper on the kind of interconnected theming that you could do in a story that's a lot tighter than this. Okay, so what would I do differently? What is my unsolicited, non-expert perspective on how the story could have been made stronger? First of all, we're cutting out the frame. We don't have the future part. We don't even have to talk about it. No narration whatsoever. It's wholly a story told within its kind of time period. Secondly, we're going to have the main kind of character arc and the main kind of theme that everyone is attached to. This sort of acknowledgement of your position, this acknowledgement of your trauma, this acknowledgement of yourself. That in order to be like the most fully realized version of yourself, you need to be able to grapple with the dirtiness of your past. You have to grapple with the uncomfortable parts of your own kind of persona. So the Lady of the Lake then is a kind of symbolic representation of trauma, is a symbolic representation of like a kind of unrealized self that each of the characters are grappling with. So when people are taken by the Lady of the Lake, this is sort of representative of them refusing to face themselves, of them refusing to grapple with the uncomfortable parts of their own histories. And over time, after their death, you become faceless because you're forgetting your humanity, you're forgetting these bonds, you're forgetting all of the parts of your history because you weren't able to kind of grapple with it. So the Lady of the Lake is the main ghost, and any other sort of minor ghost that we have already in the story, or that we add for frights if people want more frights, are really there to show that this is not the first time that this has happened. That many people have fallen before. The ghosts are scared of the Lady of the Lake because she is, just like in sort of the base story, that she is so powerful, that she's kind of this embodiment of not letting go, of stubborn refusal to let go, of holding on through just sheer stubbornness or rage. So when she appears, they disappear. They go away because they're so frightened of her. We're going to have the dolls be more significant. We kind of hint earlier that the dolls maybe are talismans. We're going to make that more explicit. All we need to know is that at some point we learn that the dolls can be used to summon the Lady of the Lake. So particularly what I'm thinking of is if you move the doll of her child away from the bed in the dollhouse, then that angers the Lady of the Lake and she comes back. Otherwise, she just comes nightly as per normal to walk up to the bed and leave. But that we can establish early on by having Danny accidentally move something and have Flora freak out and have them kind of address that situation of you cannot touch the child doll. Okay, so episode 1, first episode, Danny sees Edmund as per normal. She sees Edmund a couple of times and she always covers the surfaces. So same thing as before. She sees him in a mirror, she covers the mirror. We established that Henry doesn't care about the kids, but unlike in the show, Henry doesn't care about the kids not because he was banished, not because of sort of he's been pushed off the grounds, because that's an external reason. We want an internal reason. I don't want his brother to banish him because that takes away sort of the internal conflict that Henry might have. Henry doesn't care about the kids because he feels guilty. He feels guilty that he had an affair with his brother's wife. He feels guilty that they died after going on the trip. So this is a character flaw then, where he should be engaging more with the kids rather than he's been banished by his brother. So Henry doesn't care about the kids. Danny meets the kids. She gets the job as normal. We learn that the dolls protect people, or Flora believes that the dolls protect people. And we find that Miles is kind of bratty. He's going to be a little kind of spoiled. They can both be kind of spoiled, but I think Miles particularly needs to be a little kind of like rich kid bratty. So at some point in this first episode, we are going to be introduced to an old man who likely has dementia at some point. And this is really going to impact Owen because his mother has dementia. And he is sort of denying that this is the end for her. He keeps hoping that one day she'll get better, and if he just lingers around and takes care of her, that she will get better. So we meet this old man who has dementia. It isn't really important what his name is, and we just learn that he often wanders around. He's from Bly, and sometimes he gets lost, and sometimes he ends up at the manor. And when this happens, you just got to call his daughter, and then she'll come and pick him up. So they call the daughter, pick up the old man. Everything's fine. Normal day is normal. Most of the episode can be the same. At the end of the night, Danny is told again by Flora, don't go outside at night. Never go outside at night. But she does anyway. She goes outside, she gets a drink of water, and on her way up, she sees the old man with dementia outside. And she sees him and she wonders, like, oh, he got lost again. I need to call his daughter. But before she can do anything, Lady of the Lake grabs him, drags him into the lake. End of first episode. So we end this episode establishing we know there's an issue. We have seen the Lady of the Lake. We don't know anything about her, and we've established some of the major characters and some of the character arcs that we're going to be seeing. The second episode is when we start seeing focal episodes on a few different characters. Episode 2, Danny wakes up in her bed. She doesn't know how she gets there. She gets a phone call from the daughter of the old man. She says, have you seen him? And she's not sure. Danny's not sure if she's imagined what happened last night. So she tells her, I thought I might have seen him on the grounds, but to be honest, I don't actually know. So good luck. I'll let you know if I see anything. When she asks Hannah, hey, what happened last night? I thought I went downstairs, but I woke up in my bed. Hannah tells her, the gardener actually found you, and she brought you back up to your room. So Danny's kind of freaked out by this. Like, who is this gardener? Who is this woman? Is this the same woman that she saw attack that man? She's kind of weirded out about this. So she decides that she's going to go investigate. So we meet Jamie. We get to know her a little bit, but Jamie is super closed off, doesn't want to reveal anything, seems kind of sus. She decides to kind of try to rope Jamie into this investigation because she's sure by now, I didn't imagine what just happened. I need to know more. Am I actually crazy, or did I see a murder take place last night? But her kind of ulterior motive here is she wants to keep an eye on Jamie. She doesn't trust her. She still thinks it might be her. In the B plot, the flashbacks, we're looking at Peter and Rebecca because Jamie and Danny start finding some snippets of information about Peter and Rebecca, and who they are and what's going on because they think it might be related. And from the flashbacks, we learned that Peter is a con man, which is kind of hinted at the text, but we're going to make it explicit. He's a con man. He's done this multiple times. He has worked at a place, stolen some stuff, pretended to fall in love with a woman, and then sort of taken everything that she owns and everything that the family owns for nothing and then moved on. He grew up poor, he grew up without anything, and he's had to sort of kind of scam his way to the top. And his justification for this, just like the show, is, we're the help. They're the sort of people who have everything. They were born into it. They don't deserve it. This is the way of getting back at them. This is the way of carving a life for yourself. So in these sorts of flashbacks, we see the development a little bit of Peter and Rebecca's relationship, and we see that bed scene where he finally leaves. And here he starts to feel guilty. He has actually fallen for Rebecca for the first time, but he sticks to the plan. He's done this a million times. He knows everything you need to do to manipulate people. He knows the keys to people, as he says, as he tells Miles. He knows every side glance, every look that he has to do to make people sort of believe that he is tortured, when in reality he's manipulating them. And finally, he gets up. He promises they'll go to America, but he doesn't mean it. And in the hallway, he runs into the kids. And this is where the guilt really kind of takes over, because these are characters now that he sincerely loves and that they sincerely love him, and he is going to screw them over again. And in that moment of guilt, when he's unable to face what he has become, where he feels compelled to continue to follow his plan and steal from them, but can't sort of live with himself, the Lady of the Lake grabs him on the neck, as she does in the show, and murders him. So he's literally killed by this sort of inability to face himself, this inability to grapple with his trauma and his past. So episode 3, we're going to be focusing mainly on Jamie. So this is when Danny and Jamie's investigation really takes off. They really start spending time trying to find these sorts of pieces. And she just spends basically the entire episode with Jamie. Danny is super frustrated at Jamie for not opening up. Jamie just refuses to open up to her, refuses to tell her anything about herself. And Jamie, for her side, we actually start seeing flashbacks of her. We're actually going to give her a focal episode. It does not make sense that she doesn't have a focal episode in the main show. So we start seeing flashbacks of Jamie's life. We start seeing parts of this monologue, except they're in scenes rather than in a monologue. We see her upbringing. We see her raising her little brother. We see her dysfunctional family relationship. We see some of the emotional abuse, and we understand why she disconnects from people. We understand why she doesn't feel like it's worth it to invest in people. Because her whole thing, and she can explicitly say this, is like, people leave and they don't come back. People leave and they don't come back. What's the point in investing in people? What's the point of caring for people? What's the point of doing this when people will leave you and plants don't? So she can actually have some parts of her monologue at some point. Over the course of the episode, Danny is going to believe Jamie more and more. She's going to slowly kind of warm up and realize that Jamie is not a monster. But she is still sticking around her. She still feels drawn to her, and she doesn't know exactly why. She doesn't know, why am I still hanging around her when I'm pretty sure that, she's normal. Pretty sure that she's not the sort of culprit that I'm looking for. And this is where we start seeing the kind of hints of a queer relationship between Danny and Jamie. I like the way that Danny and Jamie's sort of relationship starts in the show with that kind of furtive glance, with the kind of like, who knew? I like where that's going. So we see this kind of budding romance, and they're about to kiss. They're about to have their sort of first moment of actual spontaneous intimacy. But Danny sees Edmund. And we don't know yet that this is Edmund, but Danny sees Edmund again, and we've sort of seen him continuously throughout the series, a little bit here and there as normal. She sees Edmund, she backs up, she freaks out, she pulls back, she can't do it. And this pisses Jamie off for a reason that makes sense now, because Danny has been hanging on to her and been sort of pressing her to open up, pressing her to express her emotions this whole time, and sort of criticizing her for it. And now she is unable to be vulnerable with Jamie. So Jamie is annoyed. Jamie is like, you're a hypocrite. Like, you have spent so much time digging into everyone else, and you haven't even dealt with your own damage. You don't even know what is wrong with you. So like, how can you get off on running around trying to psychoanalyze everyone else when you're as tight-lipped as I am, essentially? So this causes a really big rift between them. It reaffirms Jamie's damage too. It makes Jamie feel like shit, and makes her feel like, this is another example of, you invest in people, you feel safe, you try to spend time with people, and then they break your heart. So mid-season, we're gonna have just a couple of random episodes. We can have an episode of Hannah, we can have an episode of Henry and Owen, but while this is happening, we're seeing more and more of this investigation. So Jamie and Danny kind of rekindle, but it's a little tense for a while. They kind of maybe try to just be friends for a bit. The sort of present day plots that we see can be a variety of things. Maybe there's this kind of blood stain on the sheets of the bed that Viola was living in that never goes away, no matter what they use, and they can't figure it out. And the blood sheets are from when they fucking like bloodlet her onto white sheets. Like, that's gonna stick around. So it's something like that of like, what explains the blood stain? I don't understand what's happening. Maybe there's a key that doesn't fit any of the locks because it's actually for a chest, but they spend a while trying to figure that out. Maybe they find sort of the dusty paintings of the sisters, notice that they were painted at different times, and they're trying to understand that as well. So all of this is sort of mini plots for Danny to slowly learn who the Lady of the Lake is, and why is she sort of significant to the mythology of the household. So the characters know this too. It's not just an info dump that the audience learns later. So the central kind of episodes of the middle 3 episodes, I'm not invested in what order they are, and they can be anyone's. Hannah's episode is wonderful. Hannah's episode is the best one in the season. It can basically stay exactly the same. So her whole deal is needing to admit that she is dead, needing to get over her denial. I think Henry should have an episode just like normal, but again, have it be guilt that's keeping him away rather than banishment. So he's grappling with his internal demons, have his alter ego not talk. Owen should have an episode. I haven't really thought this through because Owen, unfortunately, doesn't really get a whole lot of material in the show. But it could be something like he's in denial that his mom could get any better. He thinks that if he just sticks around, if he doesn't sort of pursue the things that he wants to do, that one day she'll sort of magically be better, or that maybe she'll remember him. And all through this, we have Danny's investigation with Jamie. We have their rapport and their relationship growing in different ways. Kind of will they, won't they? And then we can also have some Peter and Rebecca stuff here as well. This is around the time where we have to start setting up Peter's plan. We don't really set up Peter's plan in the show until way too late. But we can start setting this up bit by bit. We can establish that, he came from nothing. All he has spent his life doing is chasing material wealth, is chasing material things, is shoplifting, is conning people. And the justification for that has been he was born from nothing. And this is his way of making something of himself, of taking from people who don't deserve it. So he's kind of misdirects his resentment towards Miles, who he established is kind of a spoiled brat. And his understanding is, the way that I can have a material form again, the way that I can prevent myself from slowly becoming faceless, just like in the show, is to take over this boy's body. And this boy doesn't deserve it anyway. This boy has not done anything to be born into a station. Now, throughout this part of the show, I want Peter and Rebecca to be slowly losing their faces. More so Peter faster than Rebecca, but her too. I want them to slowly be sort of fuzzying out their facial features, slowly be becoming faceless. And this is going to heighten the sort of tension and the stakes and the drama of their plight. We need to do something now. We are losing our humanity. We are succumbing to this sort of trauma. We are succumbing to our unacknowledged past. They're not going to explicitly say this, but we need to do something now. So we ended the first third with the argument with Jamie and Danny, and we're going to start the final third with the reaffirmation of this and a change in perspective here. So by this point, by episode 7, Danny and Jamie's relationship really has to have blossomed. They really have to have something special there. And a lot of the sort of stuff that we see in the show works great here. We need more of it, and we need it kind of heightened a little bit. I want more cute gay shit, is what's in my notes. But as she becomes more and more intimate with Jamie, this is what's going to be triggering flashbacks for her with Edmund. So we can get all the same sort of flashbacks with Edmund. I think this episode was largely written really well in the original show. And it can be framed in the present day by her investigating Viola's feelings of betrayal when Arthur and Perdita get together. So somehow she finds letters, she finds documents, she finds something in the past of the house that explains some of this history that came before. And through this sort of story, she gets these flashbacks of her own, because the parallel here is that functionally she is Arthur. Functionally, she is the person that someone loved that ended up with someone else and really hurt, and potentially ended up resulting in the death of the person that they were married to, or they were engaged to be married to. So she sees herself in Arthur, and she empathizes with Viola, and also feels bad for Viola, feels guilty for what has happened. So for this to work, we need an explicit Arthur and Perdita stuff earlier. We need to have this stuff hammered in where Perdita and Arthur explicitly got together before Viola was dead for this kind of thing to work. So ultimately, Danny and Jamie, they end up sleeping together for the first time in this episode. Maybe Danny's a little bit nervous, but it feels right for her. So she sort of manages to relax and spend time with Jamie. And then in the middle of the night, she gets up, sees Edmund again in the mirror. But for the first time, she doesn't cover the image of Edmund. She looks away still. But she takes his glasses, she goes outside to the bonfire. I don't know, Owen and Hannah or someone have a B plot with the bonfire outside. She goes outside and she burns the glasses as normal. But while she's outside at the end of the episode, she turns around and sees in the distance the Lady of the Lake. And she's not sure if she's imagining it or not, but she feels like they meet eyes. So here again, there's this parallel of what she is doing, where she's symbolically letting go of this former lover that she feels guilty for, and yet the Lady of the Lake is still there. The Lady of the Lake, who herself has her own trauma about being a kind of jilted lover. Episode 8 has to be the adrenaline kickoff. This is when shit gets real. This is when shit goes down. This, maybe can be focused on Flora and Miles. I've kind of been ignoring them. They're doing stuff throughout the season. It's fine. So this starts with them missing. We don't know where they are. Danny is kind of confused and Danny's worried. Hannah is too. But maybe there are some flashbacks. Maybe they've gone missing before. Maybe they have a few different hiding spots. So Hannah's like, don't worry, we'll check the hiding spots. Let's go find them. I'm sure that they're there. So we see some flashbacks of them getting into trouble, and having this somehow be a little creepy. At the midpoint, though, of the episode, they're not in any of the spots. And this is when Dani gets really, really anxious. She doesn't know where the kids are. She doesn't know what's going on. But she suddenly sees Rebecca outside with Flora, and this terrifies her. So she realizes at this point that they're being kidnapped. So she has to find where the kids are, and she has to save them. This can play out relatively similarly to the show. So she is kidnapped. She's tied up. Peter and Rebecca are trying to convince Miles and Flora to give them their bodies long term. Before this, they were only possessed for short bits of time. But a major change of this is, instead of Rebecca and Peter looking normal, they are quickly becoming faceless. So Rebecca is like maybe half human, half faceless at this point. But I want Peter, because he has not grappled with his sort of internal demons, I want Peter to be kind of terrifying. I want Peter to be serving Pan's Labyrinth, Pale Man, like Mitch McConnell, Eleganza, Extravaganza, just like terrifying, faceless body horror. He is desperate. He has nothing. He has no money. He has nothing material about him anymore, and he's losing his body as well. So he is desperate for this to work out. He needs to possess Miles pretty much immediately. We can have this be similar to the show, where he possesses Miles, and then Rebecca ends up backing out and then making Flora help Dani. But by this point, Miles is gone, basically. Miles is booking it. Miles is trying to get off the property. He's mad at Rebecca for not going with him, but whatever. If she's going to stay, she's going to stay. He still has his life set out in front of him. He just has to leave the property. So they need to find some way to get him out of Miles's body, and they don't know how to do that. Because it's been established earlier that you can summon the Lady of the Lake, Dani has the idea of, hey, we need to summon the Lady of the Lake. We need to get her out here, because if she's out here, all of the ghosts will leave. All of the ghosts will panic because she's too strong. So she goes, and this is sort of the climactic ending of episode 8, is she removes the child doll from the dollhouse to summon the Lady of the Lake. So she's summoning this awful monstrosity in order to grapple with this kidnapping. Final episode, we have the Lady of the Lake managing to effortlessly banish Peter from Miles. She's not even doing it on purpose. It's just her existence is so powerful and terrifying that he's just gone. You can make it a moment for his sake. But now they need to get the kids out of there, because now they're all in danger. Now the Lady of the Lake is walking around campus, and people are just strewn out all around the house. So Dani tells Jamie, you need to take the kids to Owen. You need to go get him out of here. But how are they going to get the kids out of there with the Lady of the Lake is right there with them? So Hannah gets to have her sort of culmination of her character arc here. Instead of doing nothing, as she does in the show, that she has fully accepted who she is. She has fully accepted that she is dead, and she is using it. She's leveraging it to help the people that are still alive that she cares about. So the Lady of the Lake approaches Hannah, because Hannah's putting herself in her way, and she reaches out to grab her throat because, again, she's all the ghosts always leave, so she's expecting she's a human. But her hand goes straight through Hannah's neck, and Hannah gets to have this empowering moment of you cannot hurt me. I am helping the people that I care about that are still alive. I have accepted that I'm dead, and I'm now using this as a source of empowerment for myself. This buys enough time for Jamie to take the kids and run to her truck. So Jamie is running with the kids. The car doesn't start for some reason. Henry shows up, though. So we're building again to him coming back of his own accord, overcoming his own guilt. He comes back. He helps them get away. He has a truck or something to help them get away. Meanwhile, Dani is trying to replace the doll in the child's bedroom. She doesn't know if this is going to work. She doesn't know if this is going to unsummon the Lady of the Lake, but she has to try it. So she's running into Flora's room. She's trying to put the doll back in the bed. So she manages to do it. She puts it in the bed. Maybe you have a hope spot or something where everything is quiet. But then bam, Lady of the Lake grabs her neck, pulls her back, dragging her to the lake. And she sort of feels like this is the end for her. But Jamie comes back. And this is sort of Jamie's culminating character arc moment, where she has seen again over and over in her life, people leave and not come back. People leave behind the people that they're supposed to care about. But Jamie comes back. This is me making a commitment. This is me showing that you are worth the investment. This is me proving myself wrong about people, that I'm back because you are important to me and I care about you. So she comes back. She manages to get Dani out of sort of the grip of the lady. And how Danny ends up resolving this conflict is virtually identical technically to the show, but has so much more meaning now. That she knows the entirety of Viola's story now, that she has spent the whole series archiving and remembering exactly what Viola went through, of trying to understand her sort of parallels to her own life, of understanding the trauma that Viola must have went through, and how she is still around out of stubbornness and rage and sadness. So she knows the significance of the words that she is saying, and she knows who Viola is. And she looks at her and she tells her, it's me, it's you, it's us. But this time, instead of it just being a random phrase that she heard 20 minutes ago, she knows the significance of those words. She knows what it means. She knows who Viola is. And for her, it's a way of saying in coded language, I see you, I understand you, I'm sorry that you went through what you went through, I'm here for you. So this reconciliation, this understanding of her own wrongdoings, this understanding of her trauma and how to grapple with this trauma is what ends up resolving this issue with the Lady of the Lake. So the Lady of the Lake can still possess her, but in this case, it's not sort of like a scary ghost thing. But in this way, it's a symbolic way for her to accept other people's trauma as her own, accept other people's pain as her own, to feel the pain for other people, to empathize with other people, and see that pain as not separate from yourself, but part of yourself as well. Epilogue is mostly the same. The ghosts are gone. Danny is happy. We get to see Owen's restaurant. Hannah's not there anymore. All of this can be the same. Henry is happy with the kids. He has managed to overcome his baggage. The change, though, will be the sort of very direct end. Instead of Danny becoming the new Lady of the Lake, dying tragically, and then Jamie telling the story to kids who don't remember, I want everyone to remember, because the faceless are supposed to be the ones that are forgetting. If we have actual humans forgetting too, it kind of takes away from that. So instead, what I'm seeing happening is Danny is happy. Danny is legitimately happy. They take the relationship one day at a time. They've built so much of their relationship through this traumatic experience that they're trying to grapple how much of it is this experience and how much of it is genuine. But it is genuine. And they do love and they do care about each other. In sort of this final scene, she is happy. And she sees in the bathroom, maybe she's, brushing her teeth, maybe she's just washing her hands or washing her face. She sees in this reflection, again, Edmund behind her, and now Viola. They're no longer scary or demonic, and that the atmosphere of this is no longer fear, is no longer denial. She's not covering the mirror up anymore. It doesn't bother her. She knows that this is her past. She knows that this is her trauma, and she's at peace with that. So she looks at them, maybe even smiles, or if that's too hokey, that she just acknowledges them somehow subtly, and then continues to go on with her day. And then she can sort of come back to Jamie, who's, I don't know, like maybe the same last shot where Jamie is on the couch, and then rest on her, nuzzle with her, put a hand on her shoulder, something to show their affection. So this is the culmination of her arc of coming to terms with her own trauma, learning to accept who she is, learning to deal with her past. All of this is just to tie each one of these sub-character threads somehow into acknowledging and grappling with your own past, your own trauma, your own guilt, your own misdeeds. So we have Hannah grappling with her denial, ends up being a pivotal moment for her in helping her friends. We have Jamie's commitment issues that stem from a past that we get to see instead of just hear about, where she breaks the cycle and decides that it is worth it to invest in people. We have Danny, who is able to let go and grapple with her own guilt, what she did to Edmund, what Arthur did to Viola, and understand that it's not her fault, that she needs to sort of move on for her own sake. And we have Henry also dealing with his own guilt, with his relationship with these two kids, deciding ultimately what these kids need is a father figure, and he's willing to be that, regardless of sort of his own personal hangups here. So everyone, again, is dealing with and negotiating and resolving their own particular histories and their own particular misdeeds in a way that is thematically tied to the Viola story, and in a way that is thematically tied to the overarching story that we see. I got no work done today.